everybody, and welcome back to this episode of Not a Sex Therapist. I think we're on episode 4, but I could be wrong about that. I'm sure you guys will know, but I won't know until this one comes out. I'll be your host. My name is Neon, or Changing Neon, if you might know me by this name, or that name, whatever name you know who I am. At this point, you've listened to this enough times, you know who I am. My name is Neon, and I'm a Changing YouTuber. I make a bunch of different content. I do art, I do writing, I do this podcasting now. Do a bunch of different things, and I'm also an average adult content enjoyer. Today's episode is going to be all about fetishes and kinks. We're going to be talking about where you get kinks, how to safely engage in kink and fetish content, how to tell what you do and don't have, all that good stuff. We have a lot to go over. You guys sent in a lot of questions about this topic in particular, and I don't know if I'm going to get through them all, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try my best. So, without further ado, let's get right into the episode, because we're going to be here for a while on this one, I think, unless, my editor cuts out like 30 minutes like they did last week. But we're not going to talk about that. It'll be fine. So, let's start with kinks versus fetishes. So I know that I established that this is what we were going to be talking about today. But did you know that there is a difference? And I think this is something that a lot of people don't know off the top of their head, which is kind of interesting to me. It's interesting to me that I hear a lot of times fetishes and kinks used, I don't want to say interchangeably, but I feel like whenever you talk about kink or you hear somebody talking about kink, it's always they're talking about like BDSM. Like when they say, oh, you're kinky, everybody's mind immediately goes to that image of like, you like the handcuffs, the rope, the like the BDSM stuff. And so I want to put it out there and make it clear right now that kinky does not necessarily mean you're into like S&M, BDSM, anything like that. Kink and fetish do have their own meanings. A fetish is something that is required to be present or engaged in order for you to get off. A kink is just something that arouses you. So it's a requirement versus a garnish, I guess is a good way to put it. Because I don't really know how else to explain it in a way. I'm trying to think about how I think I've done it the best I can. It's like having flour in your bread versus like powdered sugar on your bread. You know what I mean? Like the fetish is the flour, the powdered sugar is the kink. It's not something that's required, but it's definitely something that you can add and enhance the experience and the flavor of the bread. So it's important to get those two distinctions right, because if you could go and you could have sex without having, like, for example, if you had a foot fetish, if you could go through and you could have sex and get off without having to interact with anybody's feet, look at their feet, whatever, that is considered a kink. If you cannot get off without interacting, thinking about doing something with feet, that is then a fetish. It starts crossing into that line of like, this is required, therefore it is something that I need to interact with in order to get myself over that finish line. And there's no shame in having either of these things, like a fetish or kink or whatever the case may be for you. There's no shame in either of those. I want to make it very clear, because I feel like, especially in our society today, there's a lot of I know for some people it's kind of arousing because it's a taboo, but for others it makes you feel really bad about yourself because society really, really shoves down your throat a lot of time. Not so much anymore. I mean, it's still prevalent, but I think it was even worse in the past, where the idea of liking anything that was considered quote-unquote deviant was a very negative thing about you as a person. And it kind of marked you in that sense. It's kind of one of those guilty pleasures, is what I think of. So, if having either one does not make you a bad person. And we're going to go into later on, I have a topic I want to touch on in relation to this, that we're going to talk more about, like, well, I have this kink or this fetish, does this make me a bad person? And I will be mentioning certain things, that hopefully that won't be considered heavy content, but I'll have to look. Well, I don't think so. We'll get there when we get there. But there's some things we're going to be touching on as far as like what makes you good, what makes you like. There's no such thing as being bad for liking a kink. I say this keeping in mind specific cases. I don't want you to feel ashamed because you like something. And I know for me, for a very long time, I was very ashamed of my kinks because I am one of those people. I really like the BDSM. I really like the kink. I really like the being tied up. And I have even some darker ones that we'll touch on in the future, that are harder for me to kind of stomach and harder for me to accept that that is something that I enjoy and experience. And so those are different things that we're going to touch on in later on in this episode, but I want to make it very clear that a fetish and a kink are not the same thing, and there's nothing wrong with having either of them. Within reason. The good rule of thumb that I like to tell people is, as long as you're not hurting yourself or anybody else without consent, then you're okay. There are plenty of things that I think one of you asked in a question that we'll get to later. I think one of you asked something about having a blood kink, and for those of you that don't know, blood kink is where you get aroused or excited. I don't know exactly what the scientific name is for the kink, but I know that it excites you to see blood on your partner's body, or see your own blood, or, knife play is another one. And those kinks are not bad kinks to have, as long as you and your partner are being 100% consensual with it. And that's where the big line is drawn with a lot of these kinks, is there's no bad kink as long as everybody is of sound mind and consents. And those are the things that I want everybody to keep in mind, is you have to be able to consent for it to be okay. Hematologia and hematophilia. Thank you, Pixel. Sorry. I don't know what I was going to call you, but it was a Pixel. Yeah, so thank you, chat, for making clear what those are called. I don't know how to pronounce that one, but those are what you're looking at. Those are the actual, scientific terms for it. But those are things that, even though they may sound extreme, and this is a misconception that I hear a lot. I hear a lot of people who see it or think of a kink, and they hear oh, you like pain. Impact play is a very good one. I see this a lot with. If you like pain, if you like getting spanked, whipped, whatever the case may be. I hear a lot of people who hear that and automatically go, oh, you like getting beat up in the bedroom? Are you okay? And again, it's one of those things where it matters a lot about consent. Your consent is very important, and your consent is what defines what becomes assault, abuse, whatever, and what doesn't. And those are very important boundaries to know before you even start, before you even get in the situation. I had a viewer bring up, when I was streaming, actually, they said, I already slept with this person. I don't know if they're into me. And my thought was, you've already done it. You can't do anything about it now, but in the future it's very important to establish boundaries before you start and you get into that situation, so that you know what to expect, because knowing what to expect is going to enhance your experience in pleasure. And obviously, if it's a first time thing you're trying, if you're trying wax play for the first time, if you want to start with something small and you don't necessarily want to go tying up, you don't want to go impact play, you just want to do some gentle candle wax. They do have lotion candles that you can use. They do have candles that are designed for candle wax play in particular. And that is something where, if you are trying something new, you don't know exactly what to expect, but you know what to expect from your partner, if that makes sense. You know that that's what you're engaging in. You know it's going to be a new experience. It's probably not going to be super easy the first time. It's probably going to be a little awkward and janky, but you know at the very least what to expect from your partner, and that is where the line is drawn. You want to have the expectation, and I know I touched on this in the past episode, even being able to expect the unexpected is better than not knowing at all. That is something I want to really drive home and get clear. And again, we're going to talk about that in particular in a later bit of this episode, because there's a lot we got to unpack with this one in particular. I'm going to try to stay surface level on this episode, and we'll put more specific things in later episodes. I think we'll touch on BDSM, we'll touch on impact play, fetish play, all that stuff we'll go through on separate episodes. If you want me to go over a specific kink, feel free to put it in my questionnaire that I'll tell you guys about at the end of the episode, and that way I know where exactly you guys want me to pinpoint my research. I did do some research on this before I started, and I know I'm answering a question. I'll just repeat myself when I get back there again, but there's no real... Nobody knows where kinks come from. They do, but they don't. It's a very vague line. I did some more research on this before I started, just to make sure I was saying the right thing. And one of the things that I found was it could be because of things you experience, like your traumas. It could be just things you see. Like, there's no definite answer on where it comes from, nature versus nurture. Like, nobody knows for sure, but there are some people where some things they experienced in their childhood or traumas that can influence their kinks. There are other people that just see something and they're like, oh, I like that. There's no real psychological reason that they found thus far, at least to my knowledge, and I did some reading before I started this. And it's very interesting. So if you don't know where your kink comes from, it makes it like kind of dumb in my opinion to beat yourself up for it. That's my thought process. Like, if you don't know where it comes from, what choice did you have? You know what I mean? Kind of like being gay. We talked about this on the other episodes. Like, if you're gay, you're born that way. How are you gonna know any better? You know, how would you like, I don't know. That's a different conversation for a different day. But we got to move on to the next part. And I know I kind of touched on this when I was talking about the difference between kink and fetish, my god. But safety and consent are another really big thing. Like I said before, and I mentioned the knife play, the blood play, all that good stuff. It is entirely down to being able to consent that determines whether or not you are being like safe and respectful of everybody's boundaries. An example I'll give for myself is I know I mentioned this once before, but there is a fetish where people enjoy putting like bugs on their body. They like the way they feel, they like the way they nibble, they move around on their skin. And for me, that is a big no-no. That is a big hard no for me. I don't want to engage in that. That is not for me. And that is a hard boundary I am putting down as far as my kinks and fetishes. This is not something I want to bring into the bedroom. This is not something I want to even consider trying. And being able to understand and be consenting of those things is very, very important part of kink. I know myself, I personally enjoy like non-con. Non-con is what we call it. It's a non-consensual consent where somebody could be playing, like if my girlfriend could come up behind me and just start groping me and having her way with me, and I personally am okay with that. Even if I say no, if I don't utter my safe word, it means that she's good to go. She doesn't need to stop or anything like that. But I discussed with her before that was something that I was interested in, and she understands, and she also understands my body language. Like, I know I talked about this in the past as well with the consent episode, being able to identify, how they're feeling and being able to listen and look out for that no or that safe word is very important part of those kinks. If you're going to do anything like non-con or BDSM or anything like that, you have to remember your safe words. Even if I highly, highly recommend, if you're going to be experimenting with something new, to find a safe word, even if it's like something vanilla and it's something you've never tried before, it's something really soft and gentle. Please set up a safe word for yourselves. Like, make sure you guys are safe and comfortable and you're really watching out for each other when you're trying something new, especially if your kinks are something on the darker side. If it's something like, I want to put whipped cream on your titties and suck them off, like, that's not... I still think safe words are a good thing to have in that situation, but that is not something where I feel that unless you have an allergy or something like that, you're not putting yourself in a situation where if things were to go wrong, you couldn't fight back or you couldn't do anything about it. And so being aware and consensual and safe with those practices is very important. If you're going to start with impact play, if you're going to start with tying people up with rope, bondage play, power dynamics, all that good stuff, it's very important that when you start, and I say this as somebody who kind of jumped in head first and really overwhelmed myself at first, it's very important to start exploring with these kinks on a baby step level. If you find that you enjoy or you find the idea of somebody holding you down and in place or being tied up arousing, try baby steps. Try just having your partner holding their hands on your wrists. Maybe not putting a ton of pressure so that you can't move if you need to, but try to see, try to slowly work up to that point. Are you okay with where we are right now? Do you want to up it next time? Do you want us to get more involved next time? Those are things that I want you guys to try to start slowly with. Even with like foot fetish, that is something you can do. You can have, just having them, do a little bit of touching with your feet, or have them putting their foot on you, like doing different things that taking a baby step. What is the very smallest way that you could start engaging in this content, and then going from there? And this goes for all kinks. I'm only giving a few very specific examples just because they're the first ones that come to mind, but it comes with all kinks, like knife play. Try a plastic knife, something that won't actually cause you any danger or harm if you use it. See if that is something that you would find arousing. Same thing with blood and all that stuff. Make sure you're being very aware and in tune with the situation. Make sure you're listening for that no. And it goes both ways, regardless of who's giving or receiving. If somebody says your safe word, you need to slow down, stop, whatever situation you may be in, make sure you check in with them. I talked about doing aftercare for DOMs at some point. Keep that up too, regardless of who's in what situation. Make sure you guys are taking care of yourselves. Make sure you're being open, and that communication, even though you're having horny moments or whatever, is still open. Like I mentioned before, if you are going to be trying like gagging, try something with clothing first. Not a lot. Don't shove like a wad of a t-shirt in their mouth or anything like that. But start small. Like start with something that if the situation called for it, they could easily remove or get out or do whatever needed to be done in order to establish they're not comfortable. They need to get out. They need to stop. The scene needs to stop. Very, very important that you guys are aware of each other's boundaries, what's going on and all that. Good, fun stuff. And with that, it's a good segue into our next topic. It's also very important to understand yourself and your needs. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard for me to exactly pin down what to say because everybody is different. And your body might ask you for things that you are not ready yet. Or let me rephrase that. Not your body, but you might be thinking of something that you're not ready for yet. Example, I know I talked about this before, but the first time my girlfriend ever went down on me, I thought it sounded enjoyable, yes, but my body was rigid and stiff, and like I enjoyed it, yes, but I was not ready. It was too overwhelming. Understanding yourself and your body and understanding how you're feeling in the moment is a very important aspect of any kind of kink. To kind of set the ground rules of where you're sitting and how you're feeling about the situation, all that good stuff, you need to really be, and I know it's kind of hard because it can very easily throw you out of the moment, but it's important that you understand how you're feeling. If you are having an absolutely great time, you cannot really articulate in the moment just how good of a time you're having. That's totally fine. Make sure to kind of make a mental note of that so that you can bring it up later, so that you and your partner can discuss it. Or like, I really, really liked this, but, I would enjoy it more if this little aspect was tweaked a little bit. That is something that you can talk to your partner about. Understanding your body, understanding what it wants, and understanding yourself is honestly probably one of the hardest parts because, like I told you guys before, you have that initial guilt or like, oh my god, I can't believe I like that, or oh my god, I can't believe this is something I'm into. You need to sit down and understand and I don't want to say talk with yourself, but at least tolerate or accept and understand if you do enjoy something. For example, if you do like a foot fetish, and I know that's one that's kind of memed on a lot. It's something where, oh my god, you like feet, you fucking nerd. And that's something that is kind of societally ingrained in us. Like, that's actually a really good way to parallel what I said earlier. Like, before it was, BDSM, kink, being tied up, all that stuff was like the taboo. Now it's more feet. People will make fun of you for liking feet. People make jokes about liking feet, all that good stuff. But if you are able to accept that aspect of yourself, if you're able to realize that, what other people say does not define you and your kinks and stuff like that, and you're like, I like it, it's not hurting anybody, I'm not hurting me, I'm not hurting anybody else, then you need to be able to sit down and come to terms with that with yourself, and you will be free to explore that without, going into a scene and feeling yucky about it or feeling just bad because this is a taboo that you're enjoying and you feel guilty because, ew, like, who likes feet? You know what I mean? It's not something that I think is... I don't think you should feel bad for liking something, and I think that being able to understand what you like and what you want is the first step to being able to fully enjoy it, because I know from my experience, when you don't fully understand or you're not willing to be accepting of a kink or a fetish that you have, it's gonna cause this kind of, I don't know how to explain it because I know what I'm talking, I've experienced it myself, but you sit there and you're like, this would be better, or I'm not having the best time I could possibly have. And it's because I'm afraid to talk about what I want to do or what I enjoy. And that is the part that really I want to drive home. It saddens me because I don't want people to feel like they can't enjoy themselves just because of the way society views things. And it's okay to say if a joke bothers you or whatever, you can say that. And, if it outs you for having one type of fetish or the other, I mean, I personally feel like people who can accept that you enjoy what you enjoy and it's not hurting them or anything else, like, obviously don't be shoving it down their throat. That's a completely different conversation to be had. But somebody who can understand that that's what you're into and only for you, and I'm not into that, but I'm glad that you enjoy it. And if it bothers you, if I make fun of whoever for it or I make jokes about it, then you can tell me and we'll stop. Like, those are just boundaries to have in good friendships anyway. But you have to understand that with your own kinks, just keep telling yourself, like, I'm not hurting anybody, I'm not hurting myself. Anybody who does participate with me in this is consensual, as long as they do give clear consent. Don't fucking, like, don't put yourself in a fantasy land where they said yes and they didn't. But you have to understand that if it's not harmful, there's no reason to feel bad about it. And I say that for all fetishes. I'm talking like little play, I'm talking the knife play, I'm talking the foot fetish play, I'm talking all of that stuff. All of that, as long as you're not hurting anybody or anybody else and all parties are consensual, you're fine. Do whatever you want. Just go enjoy yourself. Because life is too short to feel bad for liking things. And if you're like me, sex is such a big part of who I am and everything like that. And it's a big part of relationships. Like, I say this all the time. Just because you guys are, just because you're in a relationship with somebody and you guys get along and you love each other, if the relationship leaves you feeling unsatisfied because of the sexual aspect, that's not something to feel ashamed of. And I know there's a lot of stigma around, well, she didn't give me sex, so I left. And I know I talked about it before, like, expecting sex for doing something is a bad thing, and it is. And I know that there's people who could potentially take what I'm saying here and say, like, well, you said that if our needs aren't met, we can leave the relationship. And that's true. If any of your needs are not being met, including sexual, and I cannot hammer that home enough, if your sexual needs are not being met, man, woman, NB, sub, dom, whatever the case may be, and you're not satisfied, you need to have a bigger conversation about the relationship, because you can be compatible in all aspects but that one, and that's when you need to decide, is this worth it to you or not? If you are, if you are understanding and you care about the other person, and it's not just a matter of, like, I think it's a very different mindset when you're thinking, well, I do all these things for her and I don't get sex, versus, well, I love her and she makes me feel loved and I love being around her, him, or whatever, and we just don't have sex very often. Those are two completely different mindsets. Leaving somebody because they will not give you sex when you feel you are owed it is very different from leaving somebody because you guys have different sex drives and your needs aren't being met. And those are conversations that need to be sat down and talked about. Is it important enough to you? Is that something that you need to feel fulfilled in a relationship? Is that something that you feel comfortable with? And I know I'm saying sex in general, but this includes kinks. If you have a fetish that you need to have to get off, and being able to have sex with your partner and enjoy it is important to you, and being able to get off is important to you, and your partner has established those boundaries that says, I'm not comfortable, or if they even tried it a couple times with you and said, it's not my thing, and, you're compatible in their understanding of your situation, then it's okay to say, I'm really sorry, it's not you. This is a need that's important to me that I need to be met, and I don't know if it'll work out. And that's something you guys can talk about. You guys can establish how important those things are to you, how important your comfort is to them, and vice versa. And that's okay. And I don't want people to use this as ammunition in their current relationships for, well, if you don't have sex with me, you'll leave. Because if you're in a situation like that to begin with, it's not good. You don't want somebody who's going to be using those ultimatums against you if you really enjoy sex or anything like that. And that is something, again, you guys will talk about. Hopefully that communication is open between you two and you can discuss stuff like that and figure out where to go. And if you guys want to try stuff, if you, like I said, do baby steps. If you have a partner and you're unsure about their kink, and I know for me that I said a hard no on like the bugs crawling on my body and stuff like that. That is a hard no for me because I don't enjoy insects in general. They make me feel uncomfortable. I don't like the sensory experience. I don't like it. I know enough about the sensations I would feel to know that that's not something I am comfortable with. But for somebody else, they may want to try it and be like, it wasn't for me, but I would be happy to do that with you. Or they may just be like, no, this is a hard no for me, dog. I'm not into this. I'm out. It all depends on the person. And I don't want anybody to feel bad or use this advice as ammunition to say, if you don't have sex with me, I'm leaving you, or whatever the case, because you shouldn't be in a relationship that uses that against you in the first place. And that's something you can talk more about with your partner and establish your boundaries and needs and all that good stuff. You just have to have that open communication. Sex is like 70% communication. It is, if not more. You have to be able to talk to each other and figure out your boundaries and figuring out where you're going to go from there, figuring out how you want to move forward, how you want to experience this kink or fetish with someone. And it's probably, I don't think it's a bad idea to, maybe not on the first date, but the second date to be, I don't want to get too deep into this, and then, you realize you're not into this, and this is a deal breaker for me. If this is a deal breaker for you, and this is what I mean when I say understanding yourself, if something like this is a deal breaker for you, like, for example, if my partner was never into power dynamics, could not do power dynamics, could only do vanilla sex, could not dirty talk, could not, just wasn't for them, I would probably have to have a sit down with them and be like, I do love you, and this is nothing to do with, our relationship as a whole, but this is something that is very important to me, and it is a deal breaker because I want to feel sexually fulfilled in my relationship because that is one of my prerogatives, and I think that we should go separate ways. And that is okay. Understanding your needs and understanding what you want and understanding everything surrounding that is going to help you a lot in terms of your relationship, exploring your kinks, exploring your fetishes, all that good stuff. Being able to establish those things is very important, and being able to accept those things and have that communication with your partner is only going to enhance your experience in the future. There is something freeing about knowing that something that you like, your partner is willing to engage in and does not judge you for it. I had a conversation, I know this is a little off topic, but it is related, I swear. I had a conversation with my girlfriend not that long ago. I have a similar thing where, you always see the I like being stepped on meme a lot. You always see it being memed on. It's like the creepy fan vibe that you get. Somebody says, oh, please step on me, mommy, things like that. It is very much memed about, and they make you feel bad about it, and they make you feel like it's not okay, and oh, you're into that, like, oh, of course you are, you fucking degenerate. And for some people like myself, that can be very harmful. That can really make you feel like you should not enjoy that or engage in that. And me and my girlfriend, we've been together for 3-4 years now, maybe longer, I don't know. And it wasn't until like last month that I told her, hey, like, I do have this kink that I really enjoy, but I wasn't comfortable telling you about it because I was embarrassed about it. I didn't know how to bring it up with you, but I do like being stepped on in certain degrees. I don't like necessarily my face being stepped on, or, I don't like foot worship or anything like that, but I do like the idea of, like, having your heel on my chest while I'm on my knees, or while I'm on my back on the floor and my legs are spread, like having you press your boot into my vag. Like, those are things that I was super, super embarrassed to talk about, and I didn't want to potentially ruin or sour her opinion of me, but after we talked about it, she was more than willing and happy to engage. And like I said, there's something very freeing about knowing that your partner is going to be understanding and caring and wants to help you get to those releases with those kinks, despite not knowing, or despite, the stigma around certain kinks and everything like that. It's very important that you have those conversations with your partner, that you are understanding of yourself. And like I said, that story I just told you, this is something that happened relatively recently. And I just told you guys about how trying to tell yourself you're not hurting anybody or anything else. I think a lot of that anxiety comes from, this is your partner, this is somebody you care about a lot. Like, if they reject you, it's gonna hurt like a fucking bitch, you know what I mean? And not in the good way. And so, but those are still very important conversations to have with your partner if that is something that is important to you. To me, for somebody who is currently rediscovering my sexuality and that aspect of myself, that was a very important conversation that I had to have with her in order to establish, the open communication, the trust, the I want you to know about this so that we can move forward, and we can engage in certain scenes where this happens, and I'm comfortable, and I'm fulfilled and enjoying it, and you also are enjoying yourself. Being able to understand yourself and being able to understand your kinks and your fetishes and understand that you're not hurting anybody is really going to help you with being able to engage in them and talk about them and everything else. And like I said, if those are things that are important to you, then please don't hesitate to tell somebody you're dating, somebody you're planning on dating, somebody that you're even like just friends with benefits with. This doesn't necessarily have to be a partner situation. I say partner very like blanket term. Could be somebody you're just friends with benefits with, could be just whatever the case may be. It's very important to talk about those things with people. If you are doing just a friends with benefits situation, can you expect them to take that and be okay with it? Can you talk to them? And you might be surprised. Like, I swear to you, you will find more people who are into kinky shit than you think. And I thought the exact same thing. If you feel bad or nervous or anxious or embarrassed about something that you like, I promise you, there are more people out there with that kink than you think. You just gotta ask. It's gonna be hard, and sometimes people will be like, oh no, gross, not for me. But I promise you, it is more fucking common than you think, and sometimes the only thing that the other person needs is somebody else being willing to say that they have that kink. Or fetish, whatever it may be for you. Just ask. Open that conversation. You might be shocked with the results, because I know I was shocked to find out how many people I knew who were into kink, because I was under the impression that was a bad thing, and I thought I was weird. You might be surprised. Open that communication with people around you. You might be shocked, and you might be able to find something new to talk about. It's really an interesting and cool thing to see if you just are willing to open that communication so that you guys can talk about it and interact and learn about it. And you might teach each other new things. Being able to understand what your body wants and what your body needs and all of that is very, very important. And I know I already talked about the steps to take. And here's some other things that I want to touch on, especially now that I've talked to you about like my kink experience and stuff like that. I know of the kinks, like the stepping on kink. I only know that I have those kinks because I consumed media such as writing, animations, porn. There was another one I'm thinking of comics, that's what I'm thinking of, that show that kind of behavior. And I want to drive it home. I want to make it very clear that porn is not a guide. Porn is more for ideas than anything else. It might give you a new idea for, a scene, some kinks, some fetishes you may have. But again, porn is not going to be how things are going to end up between you and your partner. And it's important that you guys set those boundaries and that you establish exactly how you want that scene to play out, that you establish what's to be expected. If somebody deviates from that and you like it, that's fine. If they deviate from that and you don't like it, remember your safe words. You always have those to use. A lot of the times you will see in porn, it's very acted. Like, it's very fake. Porn is meant to be the quote unquote the prettiest version of sex that it can be, or the hottest version, and so it oftentimes goes to extremes, sets unrealistic expectations. That includes kinks. If you are somebody who is super, super, super hardcore into like bondage and BDSM, you might have some of the like metal racks. I don't know the exact name for what I'm picturing right now because I don't even know if it has a name. It looked like it was just put together with some PVC pipe. But if you are into something that is hardcore, then make sure that you are being safe and consensual and everybody is aware of what is happening. Porn often shows you this, I almost want to say dystopian, depending on which kind of porn you're looking at. There's a reason amateur porn is so popular, and it is because it is real. You will often see, in amateur videos, sometimes they will check in with each other and say, "Are you having a good time? Are you enjoying it?" And those are more real experiences, and oftentimes they are more arousing because you can see when they're enjoying it. You can see when they're having a good time. And those are very important aspects to keep in mind whenever you're engaging in any kind of kinky play. It's important to understand your body, the situation, understand where your no's are, understand your partner and everything like that. And realize that it's not going to be picture perfect. That's a good point, chat. You don't see the takes where they cut because they weren't comfortable. That happens a lot, actually. I have actually seen behind the scenes to porn studios work, and there are plenty of times, and it almost breaks my heart because I have seen in the past porn stars who are actively like hurting when certain things go down and they're not comfortable and they aren't having a good time, and their co-star or whatever is just like, well, I was just doing my job, or and whoever was uncomfortable is like, I don't want to go back in there and do that again because I was and I hurt and it was uncomfortable. And that's what I mean. Sex is not going to be a picture perfect, pretty experience. It never will be. It's messy by default. It's messy by nature. That's how people are. So it's important to understand that those are different. It's different when you have sex and you watch porn. Porn is manufactured. Sex is not going to be that way. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to relax. It's okay to understand how absurd the things that are happening to you are. And I kid you not that if I was in that situation where like my girlfriend was stepping on me and I let out a laugh, like I guarantee you that she would be like, "What are you laughing?" I'm like, "This is just ridiculous. Like, I'm having a great time, but I never in a million years expected to be here." And we would just continue on with the scene. Like, it's okay to laugh. It's okay to talk. It's okay to have conversations, even if you're in like power dynamics. Like, it's okay to break character for a minute and just focus on how much fun you're having, or how cool it is, or how absurd it is. Like, those are okay, and that's good because it means that your bond is very strong and you trust each other a lot to be able to like truly show those emotions in the moment. Like I said, being able to laugh about something funny that happens during sex, like if you let out a queef, if you end up you're fucking like, it's okay to laugh. It's a funny thing. It's a funny dumb thing that your body did that you had no control over. Like, it's okay. Things like this are not, it's not manufactured. It's natural. And like I said, if you're able to laugh with your partner during like sex and talk about things that are funny and then get right back to it, like, that's okay. That means you guys have a strong and a good relationship and that you're very well established with each other. And that is okay. Don't buy into the manufactured idea of sex because it's very, like I said before, it's almost very dystopian. There's a lot of like power dynamics and there's a lot of, it's just, it feels to me, and this is why I have a hard time even listening to porn, it feels very manufactured. And you don't want your sex to be manufactured. Unless that's what you do for a living, in which case, like, good for you. I'm glad that you're making money doing something, hopefully, that you enjoy. If it feels manufactured, it's going to be a lot harder to enjoy yourself. And that is something I think that we often hear about, like, women and men both trying to and succeeding in faking their orgasms and saying like, "Oh, it was good." That is manufactured and it's disappointing. And I know, like, there are many times where you're just laying in bed like, man, that was kind of a waste of time. I could have gotten work done doing that. You know what I mean? And that's such a sad, like, that is manufactured sex. If you are done with the sex and your thought is like, man, I could have been doing something so much more worth my time, it's kind of like, was it worth it? Was it worth it? I want you guys to have fun sex. I want you guys to have fun and enjoy yourselves and truly feel like the enjoyment that being free and having sex can offer. I want to be very clear and that porn and real sex are very different in feel, and you will know, it's very different. I always say this, like, a lot of people say that they can't tell if their partner faked it, which scares me a little bit, because if you know what a real orgasm looks like, unless they're a really, really good actress, you should know what a fake one looks like. You need to know the baseline. You can always tell when someone is really, really having a good time when it comes to sex. You can. I promise, if you watch their body, you can tell. Because there are certain things, again, unless somebody's really good at acting, I've never seen an actor that has gotten every single detail right when it comes to sex, but seeing those little body twitches, seeing their body move in certain ways, like, you know that they're into it. And that manufactured sex often leads to bad sex for both parties, and I don't want you guys to participate in that. But the heading out of the porn aspect, there is something a little heavier I do want to talk about. It's not heavy, it's just something that I think needs to be heard. I know I was just talking about porn, and I talk about porn as a segue into this because if you look at BDSM in particular, if you look at BDSM porn, you will often see a very, very, very extreme side of it. Even like written porn, also very extreme. I've seen it both ways, but I want to make it very clear that just because you have a kink, it does not necessarily reflect your reality. The reason I say that this might get a little bit heavier, and the reason I mentioned non-con earlier, is because a very common one that I see a lot of people get flack for is a rape kink. And I don't mean, I mean on either end. A rape kink is just a kink if both parties are consenting. Like I said before, consensual non-consent is a very prevalent kink that somebody has, and as long as the two of them have established before that they are okay with it, that they are consenting, they know their safe words and they establish that beforehand, just because you have a rape kink does not mean you want to rape or you want to be raped. Those are two very different things. Your kinks are not necessarily reality. People who like monster fuckers, we hear that term a lot. I mean, is it really realistic that they'd be able to take a dick that's the size of their fucking forearm? You know what I mean? The reality and your kinks and fetishes are not necessarily the same thing. When it becomes an issue is when those fetishes, when those kinks start to bleed into the real world with people who are not consenting, who do not know what's going on, who do not want any part of what's going on. That's when those things start to become problems. And that is what I want to hammer home, is just because you have a kink or a fetish, it does not mean that that is what you want. For example, and this one is very vague. I know this one's going to get a lot of flack when people hear this episode. I know it. But when we think of little play is where somebody age regresses into a younger state and they do sexy things with each other while one of them is taking on a more childlike appearance. While for me, it is not for me. I don't necessarily agree with it. It is not my place, and it is entirely okay for you to engage in that kink and fetish as long as you are both consenting adults and you are both aware of what is happening. I want to really drive that point home. It is not for me, and it is not for, it's not for a lot of people, but if you are doing it within your own home, if you are doing it with somebody who is consenting, who also enjoys that kink, who also wants to partake, then that is completely allowed, and you are allowed, and you should embrace whatever you enjoy. Whatever you want to enjoy, you go do it. You do that. It is, again, it becomes an issue when that starts bleeding out into the real world, when it's no longer, adults playing the part, when it's no longer adults who are consenting. That's when it becomes an issue. So I really want to drive home this idea that just because you have a kink doesn't necessarily mean the reality. You may have a little kink, but that doesn't mean that you want to engage in sexual acts with minors. Those are not the same thing. Okay, just like the rape kink, you may enjoy the concept or the idea of being held against your will and taken by force, but that does not necessarily mean you want that to happen in real life. That is why it is so important that you guys establish your boundaries beforehand. It is so important that you establish your safe words beforehand, and it is so important that you establish the consent beforehand. Because again, some of these kinks are super, super dark. Some of these kinks are really, really rough and really hardcore. I know I myself have a little bit of a sex slave kink where that is my only purpose, is being a sex slave and producing pleasure for my owner, master, mistress, whatever the case may be. And that is, if you think about it in concept, it is very dark to be that being your only purpose, that being your only, like, you don't really get to talk or interact with other people. Your only purpose is to have sex. That is a very dark kink to have. That doesn't mean I want it to be my reality, but in a scene, that may be the way I want to be treated. And so I want to make it clear that there are boundaries between reality and your kinks. And just because you have a kink does not necessarily mean you are a bad person. You become a bad person when you start pushing those kinks and fetishes onto other unconsenting people. People who are not able to consent, people who don't understand what's happening. That is when you start running into issues of, this is not consensual, this is now abuse, this is now assault. That is when you start running into those things. And I know this is a heavier topic, and I really tried to be gentle running into this, but I want you guys to understand that just because you have a kink or a fetish, it does not necessarily reflect how you feel about other people as a person. Like I said, I personally have, the sex slave kink. I personally enjoy the non-con, the rape kink, but that does not mean by any means I would want anybody to assault me. And it actually has gotten to a point where I feel so ashamed of this kink that I have that I will sometimes have nightmares about it occurring, and it's horrifying and scary, and I hate it. I hate every minute of it. But I still have that kink when I'm completely consensual. You know what I mean? It's just, I think that there is, especially now on the internet, because I've seen it a lot. I see it a lot where people say if you have a specific kink, you're a bad person because you have that kink. The difference is choosing to engage in that kink with somebody who is consenting and willing. I don't think that if what you're getting off on is somebody who is legitimately not consenting, like in the situation, like there was no discussion beforehand, there's no ground rules, there's no safe words or anything like that. That's when I think it starts to become an issue, is when whoever you are trying to engage in sex with has no power to say no. And I know that when I say that, it's kind of a hard line to draw exactly, because I know that in non-con and rape kinks, saying no means nothing is something that does get people off, but the fact of the matter is you can still say no. Your safe word is still there, and if you're with the right person, again, if you say no and you say your safe word, that means they will stop. It is all about being safe and consensual, and that's why I want to drive this point home so hard, because I know there are people out there right now who are beating themselves up and who are afraid to talk about this kind of thing because they feel that because they have a rape kink or being rape kinked or giving, receiving, whatever the case may be, they feel like a bad person because they have those kinks. Being kinky does not make you a bad person. Pushing those kinks onto other unconsenting people does make you a bad person. And that's where that line needs to be drawn. You need to be 100% safe. You need to be 100% consensual. Whatever may be happening, big, small, doesn't matter. You need to understand where your boundaries are, and you need to understand what you are and are not comfortable with, and you need to discuss with your partner about these things. It is very, very important. Very important that you both understand. And like I said, if your kink isn't hurting anybody or hurting anybody else, then fucking go do it with your Go do it. Go embrace yourself. Enjoy yourself. Do whatever you want to do as long as you're being safe and responsible. That's all it comes down to. Please, any and all kinks that you have. And again, like I said, if you guys really want me to revisit kinks or visit kinks I talked about in this episode, please feel free to let me know, and I will do more research and I'll do more digging. One that I do want to really one that I want to bring up and talk about later is the little kink. And that is, again, as long as you're both consenting adults who are aware of what's happening, it's okay. It's, I don't necessarily like it. It's not for me. And, I don't get it, but that doesn't mean you can't do it in the safety and privacy of your own home as long as you're both consenting adults. Nobody should be allowed to stop you from doing something that you enjoy as long as you're, being responsible. I think that's going to be where we wrap up this part. Now we're going to go into questions. If you have questions in chat, feel free to go ahead and start sending those if you do have questions or anything like that. I'm going to pull up the questions you guys were asking me. We have quite a few for this episode. I talked for a bit longer than I intended to because we have a lot to get through on your guys' questions. I probably won't do all of them just because there are so many and some of them are fucking paragraphs. Some of you guys like to submit paragraphs for questions, but that is okay. So let's see. Let's pick one of the ones I really wanted to talk about. Here we go. This is one. I don't know. I think I kind of touched on this when I was talking about this before. But this user asked, how do you know if you have a kink? Is there a process? Kinda. The question asked, it's kind of loaded. I only say that because, like I touched on in the beginning of this episode, there's no real way to tell if you're gonna have a kink other than see it. I will say it is not uncommon for somebody to work up to a specific kink. For example, if you like being held down, it is not uncommon for that to then evolve into being tied up. It is not uncommon for kinks to go from one, point A to point B to point C and become bigger and a bigger deal as time goes on. That is not uncommon. It is, as far as a process, I think the only process that there could be to finding out you have one is just seeing something in media that kind of makes you go, I actually kind of like that. And then doing more research and getting into it more and finding more information and then going from there. Those are things that, like I said, nobody really knows where they come from. It's kind of a mix between nature and nurture. It's different kinds of things. It depends on the person. It depends on your environment. I would say that interacting with other people, interacting with your environment, interacting with media that you see online will probably lead you to different kinks, grow your kinks. As far as knowing, I would say if you think that you have anything that isn't just fuck, like just dick in hole, or whatever you may do normally, like in vanilla sex, you could probably say that you have a kink. Even something as small as, like, for example, biting. Biting is still a kink. I have a biting kink. I like being bitten. I like to bite. That's what it is. Like, that's just that's how you know. Is like, it's something that is not traditionally seen in sex, really. It's like, I think sex on its own, if you want to look at it as like what kinks you have, I want you to think about if you are having sex and you think like, oh, I really want to bite, or I really want to be bitten, or I really want to scratch, or whatever. Those are still kinks. Like, those are all kinks. Sex, vanilla sex is very vanilla. So even if you think of somebody who's like super vanilla, doesn't like being tied up or anything like that, if they like scratching, if they like biting, if they like doing those things, then they have kinks. It's a good measure. Like, if it's anything beyond just laying there and taking the dick or giving the dick, then that's, you have a kink. And like I said, kinks don't have to be a fucking hardcore thing. They can just be something as small as, like, I like it when you touch my cheeks when we're fucking. Like, that is, it could be something as small as that. The only process that I'm aware of is discovering your kinks, and that process looks different for everybody. You may have a friend talk about, like, their kinks. Like I said earlier, like I said before, somebody talks to you about, like, or asks you, like, what are your kinks? And you're like, well, I don't know. What are yours? And they say, well, I like foot worship. I like being stepped on, or I like being tied up, or I like, knife play, or I like blood play. All of those things. If somebody says something to you and you go, that seems kind of interesting. I might want to go ahead and give that a shot. Then I think that is a good gateway into learning more about what you're interested in, and that's something to keep in mind and something to explore as you go on. Ever since I discovered VR chat, what I like has changed. And that's another thing too, is it depends on the people you're around, the people you interact with. All of those things are going to change, not what you like, but change your exposure to things, and it might then end up turning into changing the things that you like or finding new things that you like and things like that. We have another one. I kind of touched on this before in the episode, which is probably why I thought of it, because I read this question before I started. Let me get a drink of water. All right. So this question is, what is a blood kink and what is bondage? Good question. I'm glad that you asked. So blood kink, like I was saying before, the blood kink is the enjoyment of drawing blood, of is it drawing blood that I'm thinking of? Like when you, yeah, that's what it's called. Draw blood. When you bite someone so hard you bleed. When you scratch someone they bleed. When you bleed, they like blood. They like the idea of blood on their partner or themselves. That is generally what you see with blood kinks, is the idea of sex being so rough. I don't know about rough, but it's just the enjoyment of having blood in the scene itself, your blood, your partner's blood, whatever the case may be. Think of somebody with like a vampire kink is likely to also have a blood kink, just because the two are very strongly connected conceptually. So blood kink looks different for different people, but I would say at its base, I mean, it's not all that different. At its core, it's enjoying seeing blood on you or yourself, or drawing blood on you or yourself when you're in play with your partner. And again, totally safe and consensual as long as you guys are being safe. I know with blood in particular, you have to be very careful because it's a biohazard. If you're carrying a disease or something like that. With blood kinks in particular, something like that, it's very important to make sure that you don't have anything you could transmit to your partner. Make sure that you guys are both aware of like what could happen. You're taking safety precautions, and I can go more in depth on that on a different episode if you guys want me to. I'll do the research for you. But it's as long as you're being safe with the blood kink and you're being aware of like things that can happen, things that can transmit, things that can go on between, whatever happens, just be very aware. And blood is just, I mean, it's just another one of those, it's just another kink. Like I said, as long as you're being safe and consensual, then you're okay. Oh, that's the other thing I meant to mention, and I didn't. Hopefully everybody stuck around to this point. But if you are engaging in any kind of BDSM play, the SSC is a good way to go by what is okay and what's not. If, like, are they, so like with blood play or knife play, is your partner safe? And this goes both ways. Both of you need to do these checks. Are both of you safe, sane, and consensual? Meaning, is it safe to do? Is it something that's going to cause death or injury? Are you guys being safe about it? Are you taking precautions? All that stuff. Is it sane? Meaning, are you so fucking drunk that you won't remember what's happening in the morning? Or are you so high that you won't understand what the hell is happening? Or they able to, like, are they in a mental state where they can say yes or no and understand fully what they're agreeing to? If the answer to any of those questions is not, if they are not sane and they are not able to make sound decisions of sound mind, don't fucking do it. You need to be aware of what is happening. And I don't mind, here's the thing, I do not mind if, and I know I'm one of these people, when I drink, I get horny. I get super horny. It just enhances my experience, right? But I know, like I have established prior to with my girlfriend, what is okay, what is not okay, what I want, what I don't want, and I know my safe words. She always checks with me, even if I am drinking, she's always checking with me. Hey, do you know your safe word? Do you know how to stop this if you want to stop it? And I say yes, and then we're go. So if you enjoy having sex while you're high, if you enjoy having sex while you're drunk, if you enjoy having sex while you're engaging in whatever behavior, that's fine. Make sure you guys are doing it safely. Make sure you guys are being sane. Make sure you establish your safe words, please, and make sure it's consensual. So the three letters SSC, that's what that means. Safe, sane, and consensual. Please make sure that you guys are checking all the boxes before you have sex. Every single one of those boxes needs to be checked. As long as they are aware and coherent and they know what the fuck is happening and it's consensual and it's okay, then fine. Please, for the love of God, do not do anything without those three boxes checked. Because it could be very, very bad. It could be very bad if you don't. Just please don't do that. Please just make sure that they are fully consenting, that they are aware. I meant to talk about that earlier when I talked about the other kinks and stuff like that. But those are your three words you have to remember whenever you're discussing any kind of new kink or doing anything new in a scene, something that you haven't done before or whatever. Make sure that you are agreeing to it. Make sure that they are safe, sane, and consensual, and make sure you're checking in. I cannot stress enough. Again, stress is like 80% communication. Please, for the love of God, please be communicating. You don't want somebody to be like miserable during sex. It's just bad. Don't do that. Don't do that. So bondage is the act of being restrained while you are having sex by something other than your partner. I say that because I wouldn't necessarily consider being held down bondage, but I would consider, having your shirt pulled up around your wrists and tight so that you can't move. That would be considered bondage. Bondage is a term used for having any kind of tying up or restriction of movement outside of what your partner is doing. So, like handcuffs would be considered bondage. Using your panties as a handcuff is considered bondage. Using a t-shirt, using rope, using chain, using leather, using straps, those are all bondage. All of that is considered bondage. And again, safe, sane, consensual. If you're taking away the power from somebody else in the scene, make sure that they have the power to say no, and you can respect that no, because if you can't respect that no, then we're going to have issues. You know what I mean? So make sure you're keeping those things in mind whenever you are engaging in bondage, whatever kind of kinks you may have. Just make sure that you are being aware and you are paying attention to your partner and their no's, and you're watching out for what they may say is a no or a yes or everything like that. So, this is a good question. The problem I've had in the past is that the woman doesn't communicate until after. I'd ask while we were doing something, and she says it is fine. Okay, so this is a hard one, and I do want to address it because I see this happen a lot. It happens a lot more often than you think. You're not the only one that goes through this problem. What often ends up happening is, and I know this is something that happens for me as well, what often ends up happening is you when you're in that scene, when you're in that situation, it is very hard to articulate yourself when you are in a scene that deep, and it's complicated. It's hard. You have to understand your partner well enough to know. And I don't know your situation exactly, Chad. So I want to really drive home that this is something you need to discuss with her. Discuss, when we're in the moment, you tell me you were fine, but afterward you tell me you're not fine. I want you to tell me what you want me to do in that situation. Do you want me to stop? Do you want me, you need to make it very clear that it is not all on you. Okay, I want to make it very clear, whether you're on the top or you're the bottom, it is not all on you, either of you, to establish what is happening and going on. Okay, if you are asking if what's going on is okay, and then later she tells you, I'm not into that, or that hurt, or I was very uncomfortable, then you need to sit down and discuss and say, what do you want me to do in that situation? What do you like after you're done, or when you have a minute, sit down and talk to them and say, I know this is something that's really confusing for me, and I want to have this open communication. Ask, 1 minute, when we're in the moment, you're telling me yes, but then afterward you're telling me no. And depending on what it is, I know I answered a question similar to this. In the moment, she says yes, but afterwards she's saying penetration hurts. I talked about baby steps and using like a training kit. I think trying to come up with a solution that could help work them up to whatever it is that you are doing could help. If it's somebody who is like, yeah, I'm fine, or like in my case, when my girlfriend was going down on me for the first time, in the moment I was like, yeah, I'm fine, but I was also kind of seized and locked up. And afterward, my girlfriend made sure to check in with me and was like, I'm sorry if I pushed you too hard. I will do my best to, watch your body more closely when we do things new like that, and make sure that you're comfortable. And I told her that I would do my best to inform her when I'm not feeling it, or if I'm hurting, or whatever the case may be. It's not all on you. And I think that is a misconception as well, is that the Dom has all of the power, when in reality, it's really the sub that has all the power. The sub is the one who says yes or no. The sub is the one who stops it if they need to. And I would also tell her too, if you have a safe word, which you should have a safe word. I would also encourage her to use the safe word to ask you to slow down, or a gesture. If you are like me and you have a hard time being verbal, when you're in the moment, have you guys establish a certain gesture and you're in her body that you're going to be looking at. Like, it's going to be definitely noticeable if you have like her spread eagle and your gesture is in your hands. Obviously you're going to be really looking at her hands, and it might throw off the mood. But if you are just, if you want something that you're looking at or you're constantly checking when you're having sex, say like blink 3 times or blink 4 times or whatever, like come up with a safe word, a safe gesture, and then tell her that it's okay to use that safe word or gesture if she needs a break, if she needs to stop. Because remember, safe words do not necessarily mean that you have to stop the whole scene or you don't have to come back to it. Make sure that you sit down with her and you establish that it's okay to use your safe word or your gesture to tell me to stop in the moment if you're afraid of saying no. And make sure that you open the floor too and say it is okay to say no. It is okay for you to tell me that you're not enjoying it. It is okay for you to tell me to slow down. It is okay for you to tell me like we have to downsize if it's a size thing. I know it could be. I know that that's how it is for me, or a sensitivity thing. For me, my girlfriend and I, we enjoy overstimulation, but it hurts a lot for me. And depending on what I'm feeling, I may not want the overstim. And so for me and my girlfriend, I'll tell her like slow down, like that hurts, or stop or whatever, and she knows what my stop means. She knows, she can tell the difference between my stop it, like please stop, this hurts, and my oh no, stop, please don't hurt me, Mr. Bad Guy. She knows the difference between my stops and my no's. And that's something you just learn by being with your partner over time. But I want you to open the floor to her and make it very clear that if she needs to say no, that she can say no with you. And that is okay, and you are okay with that. And she is okay with that. Those are very important. And I want you guys to establish that. And I want you to let her know that that safe word is there to tell you to stop what you're doing or to slow down. And again, you also have to hammer home that it's not just on you either. I know I talked about my girlfriend knowing my body, both ways, but it's also important that she knows that it is on her to communicate that she's not comfortable, that she uses those safe words. And it is important on your side to make sure that when those safe words or safe gestures are used or spoken, that you stop and you make sure that she's cared for. Make sure that you are, wrapping her in a blanket if she needs that. It's basically like starting aftercare right then and there so that you guys can talk it out. And so just make sure you're opening that floor for the communication. Make sure that you are allowing the space, opening that space for you guys to have that conversation and try to come up with a solution when you're both of sane mind. You're out of the horny, it's okay to talk about sex and not be horny. And I think that's a misconception a lot, because even I struggle with that sometimes. It's okay to talk about sex and not be having sex. Does that make sense? So make sure you guys take a minute to sit down and I want to make you feel good, and I want to make you comfortable, and I want to make sure you're enjoying what we do, but I have a really hard time telling what you want me to do when in the moment you say yes and then after you tell me you didn't like it. I need a better direction. What do you need me to do? How do you want me to navigate this? You tell her you can use your safe words if you want me to stop, or if you're hurting, if you want to work up to something, we can do that. If it's something like bondage, start with holding her wrists down or her ankles or whatever. If it's something like, pet play, make sure you start small. Start with pet names. Start with small orders. Start small and work up and check in with her and evaluate. Is this something you want to try to get used to it or to start, and then work up to that point? It's just a matter of feel. It's feeling it out. And I know that's really sucky because that's not a point blank, here's what you do answer, but you need to really sit down and talk with her and decide, how you guys are going to move forward. Ask her to use those safe words. Ask her to use those gestures you come up with. Ask her to be more, if she's not comfortable with something or she's hurting, ask her to be willing to tell you about that, and make sure to be receptive, because the last thing you want is to tell somebody you can use your safe word, and then when the safe word is used, being upset because it was used. Because I don't know, I'm sure it does happen in a sexual context, but I know it happens a lot in a real life relationship context, so I'm sure it happens during sex, where somebody says, oh no, it's totally fine, we can stop whenever you want, and then when you say, okay, I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm tapped out, they get mad because they're like, oh, well, I thought you said you wanted to do this. I'm sure that translates to sex as well. And so I want to make sure that you open that conversation for that room. Kind of hard not to get horny when you are talking about something you're into. And that's totally fine. I want to make it very clear that you're going to get horny talking about sex. I do it. I get horny when I talk about sex. I enjoy talking about sex. I like it a lot. It gets me going a little bit. But it's also important to separate the feeling from the conversation that's being had. Come at it from the sense of like, okay, well, now we talked about, like, once you wrap it up in a neat little bow, yeah, horny thoughts don't need to equate to horny actions. Exactly. Like, once you wrap up that conversation in a neat little bow and you come up with a game plan, then you can be like, well, now that we talked about it, are you in the mood, or are you interested? I know that's how I am. As soon as I talk about a situation with my girlfriend and I'm like, like the example I brought up earlier was being stepped on. When I talked to her about it, I was like, well, now I'm excited and I kind of want to try it. And she was like, okay. So it's you got to have that like safe relationship with your partner that like they can talk to you about it and that you can talk to them about it, and that despite however that conversation turns out, you guys are going to be okay and safe. And like I said, I know I talked early in this episode about if that's something that's prerogative for you and they're not, it's just not, you're not compatible on that sense. That is something you guys need to discuss and decide how important it is to you. And you can go over that in the future, but that is something that you need to keep in mind, and open that floor and make sure that the communication is there. Because you really want to make sure you guys are both comfortable and really enjoying yourselves. And you don't want to feel bad after the fact because they're telling you didn't like it, when in the moment they told you. It's just going back and forth. It's wishy-washy. It's telling you one thing and doing another, and that's very confusing, and it's not helpful. It doesn't help you at all. It doesn't help either of you. So I would try to open that floor for her, see exactly what it is that she's struggling with, play-wise, and say, is it the size? Do you hurt? Is it something I do? Try to open that communication. Make sure that they know their safe words are there, and that the safe words are there to tell you to slow down or stop. You can do tiered safe words, like we talked about in consent. You can do like a slow down safe word or a slow down gesture, and then a stop safe word and then a stop gesture. You can use tiered safe words if you want to, and that is totally up to you. It is up to you guys how you guys want to sort that out, but that is a completely viable option. If it's getting too much and you want to move on to the next part of the scene, feel free to say, like, this is your safe word for telling me to slow down. You guys can establish that. Just open that communication, make sure that she knows that is okay. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to open up that conversation. It's okay to say your safe word. And then, depending on the situation, come up with a game plan. If it's, something like it hurts to do penetration, get a training kit, see if she's interested in that. If it's something like being tied up, see if she's okay with just being held down first. Don't go further than that in the scene. Try to establish right away in the beginning, like, the most I'm going to do, if you're trying a new kink, like I said before, baby steps. If you're doing bondage, try to establish before you even start, the most I'm going to do to you is I'm going to hold you down. That's it. And I won't be holding you down the whole time. I'm just going to do that. I'm not going to go any further. If you tell me to go further, I won't, because I want to make sure you're okay with this first, and I want to get that baseline. You have to kind of talk about that game plan, figure out what it's going to be, what it's going to look like for you guys, and go from there. Okay. With the training kit, use one size until you can go without discomfort. It's generally pretty easy. Don't go up too fast. It's going to be tempting, I'm sure, because I'm one of those people that wants something inside of me during the moment, but afterward I really, really hurt. I actually told this story once. The first time I ever had, I'm very, very tight. I have a very hard time getting anything inside of me. Anything more than a few fingers usually is quite painful. But on the rare occasion when my girlfriend can fit maybe through 3 fingers inside, it feels good in the moment, but it's very painful after. Like, to the degree where I initially thought the first time I'd ever done it, I thought maybe I'd torn, because it really hurt to pee. It really hurt to
sit, it was just very painful, and I thought that I had thought I was gonna have to go to the emergency room because it hurt so bad, but it was just soreness and it went away. But those are things where it's like, I clearly was not ready for that yet, and I told her that, and so you need to establish that baseline first. Until you can go without feeling any discomfort or pain after the fact, a little bit of soreness is okay. But if it's to the degree where you can't use the bathroom or anything after the fact, then you should not be moving up a size yet. Wait until your body is acclimated to the size that you're using before moving up, and try not to get too caught up in that moment where they're asking for more and more and more, because then it starts leading to, well, I thought you told me you were okay with it. Make sure you establish head on, like early on before you even start, I'm not going to go any further than this point because I want to have that baseline. Okay, that's where you need to start. Do you know of any bondage items that have safeties for the bonded person to get out of it if they need to? I believe there are. I don't know any of the brands or anything off the top of my head, but I do know that there are. I do know that they make like handcuffs, I think is what I'm thinking of, that have a feature for you to get out of it if you need to. Same thing with if you're using rope or anything like that. A very good rule of thumb with rope and stuff like that is there are certain ties you can do with bondage where you can get out on your own if you have access to that knot, and you need to talk to your partner about getting that tie in the right place. And I highly recommend, if you're going to do anything with rope in particular, to take like a class or take a minute to sit down and simply practice ties. Like sexy stuff can obviously ensue, but having your partner there to practice on is going to be, not only is it going to be like a helpful experience that will teach you how to tie around their body, but it will also be a very intimate moment for you too that you guys can share with each other. I do know there are some straps, I believe, that allow for that, but I don't know any off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure there are handcuffs that do that. Rope, there's just particular knots that you have to look into, and leather straps. I think you need to look into more. Like I said, if you want me to do an episode on that, just submit it in the top, in like the questions thing. Just say, hey, can you do an episode on bondage? And I will do the research for you. I will come back and I will do the research for you. I will find products for you to use, all that good stuff. So if that's something that you are interested in, let me know. But as far as I am aware, there are things you can do to allow the sub to get out if they needed to. And just make sure, and it's sucky because at the end of the day, you have to trust in your partner to do those things to make sure that you are going to have a way out if you need it. And that's why I say make sure you really establish who you're having sex with so that you know what to expect beforehand, because the last thing that you want is something where, it goes bad or whatever happens. That's the last thing you want. You don't want stuff like that happening. You want to be able to get out if you need to. So, like I said, look into those ties. I'm pretty sure there are options for being able to get out on your own. If you want me to do the research for you, just submit a thing in my questionnaire, and I will gladly do that for you. I will come back with products. I will come back with things that I learn, all that good stuff. And we'll also go more in depth in the kink itself. That is another goal of those types of episodes. So the start of this question is, what is the source of med kink? So like I talked about earlier, when I talked about it a couple times on this episode, there's no definitive reason people have kinks. A lot of it is a mix of nature and nurture from what I understand, but because we can't, from what I understood, because the most you're doing is you are asking an adult about like their kinks and then asking them about their history and they try to remember, the most you can do is try to draw patterns and go from there and try to, make connections and connect the dots. But you can't really pinpoint where it comes from. If I had to guess, this is a personal guess, this is not backed up by anything or anything like that, this is a theory. My guess would be when you are younger and you grow into an adult, especially if you are not super acquainted with sex, if you don't have sex a whole lot, or you were growing up in a very sex negative home or whatever, the only interaction you ever had with any sexual, quote unquote sexual things is when you go to like the gyno, or when you go to your doctor to get your checkup, when somebody they stick the what the fuck is it called? It doesn't matter. It's a tool. This isn't relevant right now. I'll look at it later. It is a tool that they use. They insert it into your vagina and they spread it open so that they can get access to your cervix, so that they can take a sample of the tissue for a pap smear. So, and for men, I know with with most exams for you guys, most of it is kind of like a rough feel around, your penis and your balls or your testicles, sorry, to make sure that there's no cancer or anything janky going on. And so what I often think happens with the med kink is it kind of turns into that is the only experience you have with sex, depending on your background. And so you start to associate it with sex. That is how some fetishes form, I believe. But again, there's no actual, there's nothing really scientifically to back any of that up. It's just kind of guesses at this point because there's not a whole lot of research that's been done on it. But that would be my guess. The source of med kink is just for people who grew up in an environment that was only, they're only being interacted with and touched sexually is with doctors. And so, and I am one of those people who, when I first was having sex with my girlfriend, I flat out told her, that was very interesting. It was a very familiar, unfamiliar feeling. And the first thing I thought of was going to the doctor, because the only time anybody else had ever touched my vag or anything like that was a doctor. And so my thoughts were immediately sent me back into that feeling of oh, I'm in the doctor's office. And so I think it ends up becoming that, I think it ends up growing into that med kink over time. It's just one of those things where, as you get more and more into it, you find more and more stuff. And that's not counting the sexy nurses and stuff like that you see that pander to that particular kind of vibe either. And that is the first, that is where I think the source of med kinks come from. I'm going to answer this real quick from chat. I don't understand breeding kinks, especially when the woman in question doesn't want kids. So, breeding kinks come less from wanting kids and more from being forced, for lack of a better term, to have sex for an extended period of time and being filled with cum. So it's less about, think about it this way, it's less about the kids and more about the having the cum inside you and going again and again and again and again and again. It's less about the kids and more about the situation that you are put in for a breeding situation. It's more about that, I just want to keep going. I want to keep going. Even when I can't take it anymore, I want more, more, more. That's the kind of mindset behind it, because I have a breeding kink. And that is something that I am into, is the idea of being put in a situation where I can't move and I am simply forced to take it again and again and again, even after I can't take it anymore. That is what is arousing to me. And I think that's what it is for a lot of women. Is I don't want kids either. I am very much anti-kid. I do not want children. But I think it's more about the scenario in which you are being quote unquote bred than anything else. But there are some people who really enjoy the child rearing aspect of it, and that's totally fine. That is up to them. That is all more power to them for enjoying that. What is the source of deviant kinks? So, there's no, again, like I said, there's no real, nobody knows. I'm just gonna zip all that up in that fine little, put that in a little bow and say nobody knows. Unfortunately, I can give you my theories, but my theories are just theories, and nobody really knows. All they know is that it can be kind of a combination of nature and nurture, but nobody knows for sure because there's not enough research on it yet. And so I don't have a good answer for that question, unfortunately. Why does sedative hypno kink exist from both sides? So this is, again, another theory I'm throwing out there because, again, there's no real research to support it, but it is the theory, my theory, that a lot of it comes from not being able to fight back and being in a situation where you really, really, really like the situation of not being able to, it's you're so, I'm trying to think about how to word this. It's almost in the same field as mind break, right? People like the idea, myself included, of being so fucked so hard and so often that they literally cannot comprehend not liking it anymore, or being able to fully focus on the pleasure. And that is something else with hypnotism, is you are supposed to be hypnotized in a way, or if with sedatives, you are so I don't want to say out of it, but it's like the only thing you can focus on is the feeling. That is my only theory as to why that would be. You are so deep because you are hypnotized, and you are so deep because you're it's sedated or whatever, that you are only thinking about the feeling. The feeling is so good that is the only thing, like that is the only thing coming through in that mess of a mind that you have right then and there, is how good it feels, and it often enhances the experience for some people. And that is why I think that kink comes through. That is what it is for me. I know for some people, like, if you have opinions or anything like this that you hear and you're like, oh well that's different, or this is different for me. Like, feel free to let me know, and I will gladly talk about this on the podcast again. But that is my assumption. Is a lot of it comes from the fact that when you are in that state of, like, you're not quite with it, or you're in a different place mentally, that's all you can focus on is the feeling of being the slave, the feeling of being the object of pleasure, the feeling, like, it's very much a feeling thing, being in your body kind of thing. Is grooming always right when wrong? When is it right? So this is a loaded question. This is one that I do want to talk about, though, because it is something that, like I was talking about before, with like pet play, hypno kinks, with for me, the sex slave kink that I have, that is often the grooming kind of comes from, think of like Pavlov, right? You think of, like, when somebody says, when somebody calls you a certain name, like pet, you're automatically thinking, like, oh well, this is horny, like, I'm gonna get on my knees. Like, it's that type of grooming. The grooming is only okay when it is consensual. I personally really like the idea of my girlfriend telling me to kneel, and it's like an automatic response. Like, I can't not do it. I like that idea. I think that idea is very arousing, but it is not okay if it's something I am not okay with. It's something that, again, a kink is not bad unless it starts pulling in people who are unconsenting or cannot say one way or the other if they want to engage in that activity or not. And that's when you need to be worried about it. That's when you need to consider talking about stuff like that and using those boundaries. And when it's no, that's when it's wrong, is when it is no longer consensual, and whoever's a part of it is no longer, like, aware of what is happening. And I know that I just talked about, like, sedative kink and stuff like that, and that is one that is very dangerous, and I highly recommend you do your research on prior to, and then go and do it. Then go make sure you do it. You want to make sure you guys are consenting, and make sure that you are of sound mind when you are discussing this, versus, like, already under the influence or whatever. Make sure that you are in a good place to decide how you feel about it before you do anything like that. How to non-con. Okay, good one, because I know I touched on non-con before. So, non-con! Non-con is one of my favorites. I personally really enjoy the idea of simply being grabbed and used whenever my partner feels like it. However, if you are going to do non-con, like I touched on before, make sure you already establish your safe words. If you want to use tiers safe words, that's okay. If you are going to do non-con and you're going to be using gags or bondage or whatever, and they won't be able to use their voice or their hands, make sure that your safe gesture is something that you can see, something you are actively paying attention to. If you like looking into your partner's eyes when you're fucking them or you're doing a scene or whatever, make sure that, see if they can do a gesture that's on their face, on their eyes. Blink 3 times in rapid succession if you are uncomfortable, you want me to stop, wiggle a couple of times. I mean, I don't know, wiggling is kind of interpretational. So something that's, like, very clearly something that's out of the ordinary when their body wants something from you and it's very sexy. Make sure that you are, like I said, make sure you establish what can happen during your non-con scenes. If, for example, if you say no, no means, no doesn't necessarily mean no, because it's not a safe word and it's just part of the scene. Make sure that they know, I would never do this when we're doing whatever. Like, make sure, like, if it's something uncomfortable, like for me, the bugs. I always bring up the bugs because it's the one that's, like, a really big no-no for me. But, like, with bugs, if make sure you establish ahead of time, like, I don't mind the non-con, but I absolutely will not tolerate bugs on my body. Do not do that. Okay, that is something you need to establish before. If make sure it's kind of more of like I would say like an overarching set of rules rather than a situational set of rules. Ground rules, like never do this when we're doing non-con, never do this when we're doing non-con, always do this when we're doing non-con. Make sure that you establish that beforehand. And then, after, it's kind of one of those things that you have to take those rules to heart, and then non-con will start to flow a little bit more easily. So make sure you guys establish your rules, your ground rules for your non-con. Then make sure you have your safe words, or probably better to establish the safe words first. Make sure you establish your safe words, your safe gestures. Make sure that you take into account they won't be able to use their hands, they won't be able to use their voice. Make sure whatever it looks like for you, if you put blinders on your sub or whatever like that, make sure that their gesture is something that you will still be able to see. If you put a blindfold on, if you put a gag in their mouth, if make sure that they have some way to communicate with you that they are not okay, or that they need something to happen, or something needs to slow down or change. Those need to be ground rules that you set for any scene, but especially non-con, those ground rules need to be set before you even begin to think about non-con. Okay, you need to make sure that you are being safe and taking everybody into consideration, into account. Which kinks are more common than they look? Fucking BDSM. I know that sounds crazy, but in my experience, I have met more people who are into bondage and BDSM and master pet play than I ever thought I would. And I don't know, it's something that it's I've met people who were like, it doesn't seem interesting to me. I'm not really into impact or pain play. And then they come back to me 2 months later and they're like, okay, so actually I was wrong. It is very, very common, very, very common to find kinks of that. It's very common for people to enjoy certain kinks. The stepping on kink, I think, is more common than people think. The foot fetish kink is very, very common. The BDSM, bondage, pet play, all that stuff, power dynamics, all very, very common. All of that, very common stuff. I would say those are some of the more common, more rampant ones. More of the niche ones I've seen, oh fuck, what am I thinking of? The bug one, which is one that's, I don't know, maybe that one is more common than I think too. I only just recently found out about it. You've got the little kink, which is probably more common than you think too. There's all kinds of kinks. There's no, and the other thing is too, is it's really hard to tell. And the other question on this one too is, what are the demographics of kinks? What are the hotspots and dead zones? Is very hard to answer because there's no good research right now. Because sex is kind of one of those things that's been taboo for so long. So many of the questions that they look at are, there's so many questions that you have to keep in mind. You have to understand that there's not a lot of research about this topic yet because of the taboo that it's had for so many years and still kind of does. I am actively trying to get rid of that stigma. There are other sex positive people trying to get rid of that stigma, but it's a hard fight. It is a very hard fight when a lot of people find out the minute that you do sex, they immediately stop. If you want to do research on a demographic or on a specific type of kink, it can be very hard to get accurate results when as soon as somebody hears about the sex, they turn you down, even if they enjoy the kink or whatever it is that you're trying to get a survey on, because it's embarrassing and they don't want to talk about it in public or talk with another person about it. Same thing happens with medical stuff. It's even though you should talk to somebody about it, it's hard because it's kind of a personal thing, and so it's very hard to get that research that you need to determine those things. And play is crazy. It honestly scares me. I have a little bit of a gunplay kink. I'm not gonna lie. I get it. There are certain things about it's a mental game. I want to make this clear. A lot of kinks are mental games. Okay, a lot of it comes down to the situation rather than the actual feeling. For me, gunplay is I like the idea of, for example, my girlfriend coming up behind me with obviously a fake gun. I don't want a real gun near me in that situation, but a fake gun and pressing it up against me and being like, if you don't do what I tell you, I'm going to shoot you dead. It's just kind of another one of those things it's another one of those more the situation rather than what's actually happening kind of deals. That is where we're going to wrap up. If you have any topics, any questions, any comments, anything that you want to correct me on or anything like that, please do not hesitate to head over to my links. You can find my link to my podcast website, which has a link to my form where you can answer or ask questions or ask for specific topics over at my website. That's changelingneon.card.co, changelingneon.card.co. kinkunlocked.co, and you can find my links there. If you want to catch me recording these episodes live, I do them live every Monday on Fansly at 10 a.m. EST, roughly around that time. And these episodes come out every Thursday at around 9 a.m. EST. Sorry, I had to brain blast there for a second. If there's anything that I said that you disagree with, or you think is wrong, or you want to correct me on, or anything like that, or any other questions, feel free to go to that questionnaire. I also will be posting all of these answers in my Discord. If you want to go check me out there, you can. If you want to catch my normal streams, my normal gaming content, I stream every weekday. Every weekday at the same time, 10 a.m. EST. And thank you everybody who's been listening to the podcast. The feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. I'm actually kind of shocked. Not a lot of people have seen it. I mean, 20 downloads is still a lot of downloads. That is a lot. So thank you guys a lot for really pushing forward this podcast and really, really getting interested and invested in and helping me break down these stigmas and supporting me and educating people in what I love to do. I'm having a great time with this. I love talking to you guys. I love answering questions for you. I love finding out this information for you and hopefully helping you guys feel more comfortable in your kinks and your space and all that good stuff. So thank you again so much. Thank you everybody so much for listening. I will see you all next Thursday at 9 a.m. Subscribe, follow, whatever you got to do on your respective podcast website, and I will catch you all next time. Bye-bye!